Ladies and gentlemen, it's indeed my privilege and pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Rajiv Shah, who really needs no introduction, but just by way of facts, Dr. Shah serves as the 16th administrator of USAID, and he leads more than 9,600 professionals in 80 missions around the world. And that clearly makes it, in my view, the largest development assistance organization and the most extensive in terms of its reach. And under his able leadership, USAID has leveraged billions in private sector dollars, and therefore that's a testimonial to his ability to mobilize resources from a variety of sources, which clearly multiplies the purpose and the intent of what USAID is doing. Since 2010, Administrator Shah has led Feed the Future, which is President Obama's landmark food security initiative, and the US government's contribution to the New Alliance for Food Security and Nutrition. Through specific policy reforms and business investments, the New Alliance seeks inclusive and sustained agricultural growth to lift 50 million people out of poverty by 2022. And it's already attracted more than $10 billion in commitments from over 200 companies in 9 sub-Saharan countries. So I'd request you to, I'm going to say more, but I'd like to request you to give Dr. Shah a hand on this remarkable initiative. Okay. All right. Well, I'll just go through a few other points which I think would be of relevance. In June 2014, Dr. Shah co-convened the Acting on the Call, which rallied the global community behind the goal of saving 15 million children and nearly 600,000 women by 2020 by scaling up targeted, evidence-based and high-impact solutions. He's managed the US government's humanitarian response to catastrophic crises around the world, the earthquake in Haiti, to the famine in the Horn of Africa, to Typhoon Haiyan in the Philippines, which, as you know, was a devastating event. And before becoming USAID's administrator, Dr. Shah served as Undersecretary for Research, Education and Economics, and as Chief Scientist in the US Department of Agriculture. He's also served with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation for 7 years, including as Director of Agricultural Development in the Global Development Program. Originally from Detroit, Dr. Shah earned his medical degree from the University of Pennsylvania Medical School and his master's in health economics. Before I ask Dr. Shah to give you his keynote address, I might tell you I sometimes pass as a spurious medical doctor because on one occasion I co-authored a paper in a medical conference, and they assumed I was a medical doctor, so they sent me a certificate, R.K. Pachori, MD. So, but Dr. Shah is a genuine medical doctor, and clearly, thank you so much, knows more about health than a lot of people who have not practiced after they have actually got their degrees and have been far away from public health. So with this introduction, may I request Dr. Rajiv Shah to give us his keynote address.
Thank you, Dr. Thank you. I'm very grateful for your friendship and your leadership. I think as I'm reminded of events like Typhoon Haiyan, I'm reminded by the fact that those types of climate-related emergencies now happen far more consistently around the world, and Dr. Pachori's leadership in helping the world to recognize the challenges and the solutions to a changing climate continue to inspire so many of us here in the Obama administration and all around the world. So thank you for having me. I'd also like to welcome Dr. Peter Salovey, the president of Yale University, and other distinguished guests. You know, it's been really exciting to work together with Terry over the years, and in particular as we launched last year our Global Development laboratory here in the United States, we're proud to note that Terry is a critical and important partner of the community of scientists that are trying to come together to tackle the world's most challenging problems. It is particularly exciting to be with you here today and to be with you, Dr. Pachauri, just after Prime Minister Modi's really extraordinary and important visit to the United States of America. The reception he received in Madison Square Garden, the power of the business community that came together to hear his message of hope and resilience and effectiveness and investment, the emotional connection that so many Indian Americans share for a leader who has managed to secure the first major significant win in the parliament, and therefore has the political mandate to make the changes that I think we all believe will help India advance its own development, have all been very important. And I can speak on behalf of President Obama in thanking those of you that participated these last few days, and note that I think the President himself took a great deal of confidence and enthusiasm about a renewed and reprioritized relationship between the United States and India. And it's in that context that we ask ourselves, what are some of the most important things this renewed relationship can in fact accomplish? From health to agriculture to climate change, I have seen the optimism of this new relationship yield real results in just a few months. I've seen Indian health experts lead the fight against preventable child death in India, around the region, and now increasingly around the world. As India has increased its funding for the 184 districts in the country where 1.4 million children still die under the age of 5, as they've created targeted evidence-based strategies, we take hope from India's leadership and example. We know that that leadership will extend more broadly, and I welcome the recent announcement that India is putting $12 million into the Ebola response in West Africa. And in my mind, the resources there are less important than the technical leadership of Indian doctors and critical care nurses and public health experts that will now come to help assist all of us in a coordinated international effort to address that immediate challenge. In the same way, we have seen our partnerships with India seriously address the needs of hunger and malnutrition, which are still too persistent in a country that has experienced the economic growth that India has over the last 10 to 15 years. We know that through our partnerships in the past, we had shared in a common green revolution. And for our partnerships current and moving forward, we are seeing Indian technologies and innovations ranging from improved crops to improved use of mobile phone connectivity to more efficient use of fertilizers and water yield a new sustainable green revolution that can power agriculture and poverty reduction, and importantly, address the 840 million people that will still go to bed hungry tonight around the world, and that can happen in a sustained and effective manner. One of the partnerships I'm most proud of is a partnership that USAID has with FICCI, and I welcome Siddharth Birla here today as FICCI's president. But our partnership, which we call the Millennium Alliance, has helped to identify and invest in Indian entrepreneurs and innovators who are creating businesses that bring technology and science to the purpose of reducing poverty and suffering, and do it in a sustainable way. One of my favorite projects in that cohort of winning projects is called AgSri, which is a sustainable sugarcane project. And they found that by spacing the sugarcane and using water and fertilizer in a more careful and sparing manner, you can double yields, improve economic outcomes, and protect the environment and create sustainability all at the same time. Those are the kinds of innovations that we want to nurture in India and share around the world. And that is the model that we would like to see more actively deployed in the energy sector, which of course is the purpose of our gathering here today. We're starting to see leaders like Orb Energy, which has a portable credit guarantee from USAID's Development Credit Authority, bring solar energy to the poor and invest in rural microgrids that can help address energy access in a sustained business model. We've seen USAID's grantees like Miragao Power and Graham Power set up off-grid systems that are reaching rural communities with new energy solutions, bringing light and low-cost energy in an effort to employ more people, create more jobs, and enable a better standard of living. We've in fact invested, as I noted last year at this setting, more than $100 million in a public-private partnership to nurture these types of innovations and partnerships that are certainly green and that also advance the cause of energy access and sustained energy production. And this new model of partnership is one that I'd like to speak about for a moment, because I come away from Prime Minister Modi's visit with the strong belief that we can now take what I believe are a series of successful but still small-scale partnership successes and take them to a far, far greater scale. At USAID, we have transformed the way we work. It used to be the case if we wanted to build a road or a power plant, we hired a contractor to build a road or a power plant. And as direct and linear as that is, it ignores the reality that today our resources are minuscule compared to the vast amounts of foreign direct investment, local wealth, and private capital flooding into every single sector that we work, from health to energy. So we've created new tools to engage the private sector, mobilize private capital, and engage countries and governments to be more effective at quickly seeing that private capital deployed for the purpose of poverty reduction. And it's in that context that we are excited about some of the major new initiatives we have heard that India will now make a priority. The Prime Minister spoke about the desire to accelerate energy access for all Indians, which we think is a laudable, critical, and necessary goal. Together, we've already leveraged $2.4 billion in private-public investment partnerships with India for this purpose. And as part of these efforts, we've teamed up with the Selco Foundation, a local leader in India serving the needs of the poor. Together, we're establishing 6 laboratories throughout southern India that will focus expressly on solutions for marginalized populations. These are just some of the examples that we can pursue going forward. Today, 76 million families in India do not have access to electricity and everything that that provides. Children that still have to study under street lamps, businesses that have to close at dusk, and clinics that struggle to keep vaccines cold in a country that much of the rest of the world noted with great enthusiasm just sent a rover to Mars. That kind of dichotomy is frankly unnecessary in 2014, and we know how to change that reality. We know that it's not going to be a series of small-scale individual projects that leads to that transformation. We know that it is going to require new technology, and that's why today I'm proud to announce we're committing up to $30 million to address the challenge of intermittency on the grid and to create a Green the Grid initiative as part of our clean energy partnership with India. But technology alone will not be enough for this purpose. We also need to insist that the Indian government now follow through on the major commitments and reforms it has publicly committed to. We know that the government has prioritized hydropower from Nepal and elsewhere. We applaud the new agreement that the Prime Minister has signed with Nepal to create a framework for India's purchasing and deploying some of the access to that power. If India now follows through on that and engages in a power purchase agreement with Nepal, it will unlock billions and billions of dollars of private investment that can create 5,000 to 10,000 megawatts of energy quickly and in a clean, efficient manner, avoiding additional carbon emissions and pursuing the goal of climate change and energy access at real scale. We would like to work together to move that forward. We know that if India follows through on its commitment to a handful of mega solar projects, each of which are larger than a gigawatt in terms of producing energy for the grid, that we can have a new global leader in solar power. And we are eager to help India actually execute the power purchase agreements that will be required, long-term, credible, and backed by real risk guarantees that will allow private capital to create those mega projects in solar. We applaud the opening up of the rail sector with 100% openness to foreign direct investment. If we saw that in agriculture, in food systems, in energy, we believe you could really take off in terms of achieving these types of goals at scale. And we applaud the effort to improve the grid with public investments of nearly $8 billion committed to the Indian power grid. We think that's very important, and we hope that as it moves forward, it will connect with the best that international science has to offer to ensure that these are smart grid improvements, efficient grid improvements, and help to create an actual integrated energy market throughout South Asia that can absorb dozens of new megawatts of new gigawatts of power generation. Those are the types of concerted public and private partnership actions that are required to take some of our exciting but small-scale successes to transformational scale. And USAID, coming out of this visit, is fully committed to working with you, Dr. Pashari, with the Indian government, with private sector leaders to usher in that new reality. So thank you for your attention and your commitment. I look forward to a conversation, but I am genuinely enthusiastic about a new day for business, for partnership, and for development in a country that has so much potential that has yet to be unlocked. Thank you.
I think Dr. Shah is very kind to have spared time to stay on for a few more minutes. I believe it will be very useful if there could be some questions, which I'm sure he'll be very happy to answer. But please be brief with your questions. Do announce your identity, and then I'll request Dr. Shah to respond. So who'd like to start? Can we get the mic? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pachauri and Dr. Shah. I think you guys are doing phenomenal work, especially in India. My name is Prabir Ghosh. We head CASE Bharat. It stands for Council for Accelerating Sustainable Energy. The key questions we wanted to ask is, two of our members are actually the key architects for the PACE D program for both energy efficiency and renewable. It's a $20 million program, but one of the concerns has been there's been no matching funds from India to make that a real handshake because I've been fairly deeply involved with that, and I'd like to get your thoughts on it. You talked about a private-public partnership. How do we get these funds to actually generate more private involvement from FICCI and Mr. Siddharth Birla to get involved? Because really clean energy in the past has been a highly costly investments where you have to put in, but now in 30% of the places it's actually more beneficial to put in clean energy compared to others.
Well, you know, I think I appreciate that point, and I'm glad you made it. I appreciate the example that we've set with FICCI on the Millennium Alliance, where I think FICCI partners and some other international partners have more than doubled the money that USAID has put in. Initially, we put about $15 million in and saw that matched very quickly through FICCI and its partners. We have not had the same success with the government of India and PACE, which is our clean energy partnership. And I think it illustrates the point that the dynamism and speed of the private sector is really where we believe we will unlock potential in India against all of these issues. I would note that when the Prime Minister spoke yesterday, he made a point of saying that government doesn't necessarily have to invest in doing these things. Government has to almost step out of the role of doing and focus on the role of facilitating by creating transparent regulatory frameworks, welcoming the private capital, cutting red tape to be effective. And as I think about energy in particular, 2 years ago, President Obama asked us to scale up energy efforts in Africa. And 2 weeks ago, or about 2 months ago during the African Leaders Summit here in Washington, President Obama announced that we would triple the size of that effort, and that in addition to the $7 billion or so of public money we were putting in, African and international private investors would put in $20 billion towards what we call Power Africa projects. If we can do that in sub-Saharan Africa, we should be able to do that in India. But it does require the Indian government transacting on projects quickly, efficiently, and with real transparency. And I thought we saw the Prime Minister make that commitment these past few days. I know our American investors and companies heard that. And our offer is that we're willing to now work together on these big energy programs if India can follow up on those commitments.
Thank you. Mr. Birla?
Thank you, Dr. Shah. No real question, but just some comments. Thank you very much for recognizing FICCI and the work that we've done, and we equally appreciate the faith that you put in us and look forward to doing more things. Second, 24 hours, while the Prime Minister was here, it's very easy to be enthusiastic, and I'm very happy to see that the enthusiasm continues 24 hours after he's gone. I'd just like to make a comment on that. You mentioned a lot of areas where the USA and the world would like to see India improve and implement on the ground. I can only share my sense with you that right now everything is in an articulation stage. As we come nearer to the end of the year, and as we come nearer to the next budget, which is February, we will see probably an exponential speed of actual implementation on the ground. So many of, because I think this is a planning period, we've just gone over difficult monsoon period, etc. A lot of things are happening. This is what I can share with you from my sense. And between, say later, post Diwali, maybe towards the end of the year to the end of the first quarter of next year, we will see an exponential increase in the actual implementations. So many of the things that you spoke about, we'll be very happy to also use our channels to convey these sentiments to our government. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? At the back there.
Hello, it's an honor to hear you. Thank you so much for being here today. Global Labs. You talked about some ways, I'm Dara Kotavala, a PhD student at Arizona State University and working here with US EPA. Global Labs, in addition to the power purchase agreements that can potentially help make possible some of the opportunities in energy from private capital, what kinds of approaches might they be taking to make more of these potential small projects able to come up to scale? And what can governments, including that of India, do to support that?
Well, let me try to answer that, and then Dr. Prashari, if it's okay, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Okay, because I think you're the one who won the Nobel Prize here. I think you could share your insights with us. On that, I'll just give you an example. We're working with MIT on battery technology that we believe could be integrated into the Gram Power project in India, because one of the challenges has been having, and I'm not an expert, perhaps Dr. Prashari would know more, but having the right kind of battery that is able to withstand the heat and the conditions you might see in certain rural environments and still maintain a high degree of capacity for some of these off-grid renewable energy projects. I just think that's a very good practical example that if scientists here and in India can work together to improve that technology, but design it specifically for off-grid rural applications. And there are entrepreneurs through these projects that are trying to scale up their off-grid rural solutions. That's an example of where that kind of laboratory effort can connect with reality and actually change the facts on the ground. But the question I was eager to ask Dr. Prashari is, we've talked a lot about these smaller scale applications, and I do wonder, as you think about India's energy mix over time, what you think the role of hydro, solar, other renewables would be, and do you believe primarily in sort of small-scale rural off-grid solutions, or do you think these mega generation projects that reach the grid is really the right long-term solution?
Oh, I think that's an excellent question, and I really think in India's context, it's essential to have a mix of everything. In fact, Terry has been involved with the Clinton Climate Initiative in carrying out a detailed feasibility study of 2 projects, one in Rajasthan and the other in Gujarat, of 3,000 megawatts each, which are basically solar thermal projects. And of course, they would have storage as part of that facility. The benefit of these 2 projects is that, firstly, there's very high insulation in Rajasthan and Gujarat. Secondly, Rajasthan in particular, and to a lesser extent Gujarat, have lots of land where, space is not a problem. Thirdly, I think these projects would require fabrication in India itself, in which case the cost would be substantially lower than importing all the equipment from overseas. Much like the Mars mission that you mentioned, it's been a very low-cost initiative, largely because technical and scientific manpower in India is much cheaper. So I would say that there's an enormous space for this, and I think under Prime Minister Modi that's bound to happen. We ourselves have been involved in making presentations to the Energy Minister, Mr. Goyal, and a couple of other ministers, because for India this is a matter of survival. It's an issue of energy security. If we don't move in the direction of renewables, then our dependence on fossil fuel imports will continue to grow, and that has all kinds of risks associated with it. I just wanted to mention one little fact, if I may. Prime Minister Modi, when he was Chief Minister of Gujarat, got in touch with us 6 years ago, saying he wanted to train his senior officials on climate change. So we put together a program for them for 2 days. He brought about 20 of his senior officials, sat through 3 hours of the sessions himself, and then a month later when I went back, I had breakfast with him, and he said, how would it be if I set up a ministry of climate change in Gujarat? So I said, you'll be the first chief minister to do that. And he did. And then he brought out a book on climate change. He called it Convenient Action, in some sense a takeoff from Al Gore's Inconvenient Truth. And Dr. Abdul Kalam and I were invited to release that. So, he is the right pedigree, if I may say so. He's going to do things in this area.
Good.
Any further
Let me add one thing to this, which is I think if the Indian government or the Indian municipalities and the local utilities engage now in serious 20, 30-year purchase contracts, partners like USAID, we're not going to bring billions of dollars of public money. India doesn't need that for this purpose. But what we can do is we can provide credit guarantees that increase the bankability of these projects. And there's really no reason why a year from now you shouldn't be sitting here talking about 20 or 30 billion dollars of increased investment in large-scale renewable energy generation.
Absolutely. I hope this will happen, and I'm very grateful that you see USAID being able to provide play a role in keeping with the sort of software aspects of such projects, which is very important. Maybe one final question.
Hi, thank you very much, Dr. Shah. My name is Jake Schmidt. I'm with the Natural Resource Defense Council. We heard earlier, and I'm sorry you missed it, that Rockefeller's Foundation was putting, I think, 65 million, 75 million, can't remember if I got the exact number right, for off-grid renewable deployment in India. And we know that there's a million models. There's so many models of deployment of sort of these off-grid solar markets that are emerged, I'd say, over the last 3 years. I know the U.S. government budget pretty well, and that 75 million, if that's the right number, that's a statistical error in the United States government budget. So I'm curious why the U.S. why we don't have sort of $1 billion going into the clean energy access the way Exim did. If you mobilize sort of a Power Africa initiative in India, you could scale at a much larger amount of initiatives, and it's kind of embedded in some of the announcements, but it doesn't seem like there was a concerted program announced yesterday to sort of target energy access in India and put the kind of resources and skills and know-how that the U.S. has and is trying to do in other places. I'm curious if you could speak to that.
Well, thank you. That's an excellent question because it's been a very carefully discussed potential possibility. And the reality is what we saw in Power Africa was that you could very quickly create 30, 40, 50 projects that had been either stuck or failed to be fully conceptualized for years. And you could move them to financial close and beyond in an 18-month period if you had two critical conditions in place. The first is a government willing to prioritize and transact on those deals and to do it quickly because time is money when you're trying to attract private investment. And the second was some coordination amongst a set of developers and multilateral development banks and others who are critical to the success of the projects, but whose processes, Exim is a great example, can sometimes be cumbersome and therefore yield long delays and prevent projects from achieving close. By solving those two constraints, President Obama was basically in 18 months able to triple the scale of Power Africa and attract $20 billion of private investment. So the question is, can you solve those two constraints in India in a timely manner? And I think that is first and foremost up to the Indian government. If there is execution, as everybody says there will be, against Prime Minister Modi's remarks these past few days, and if the local and international financing partners can come together and act in a more syndicated manner, I think there's no reason why we couldn't have a Power India that is bringing both the best of American tools and technology, but also a humility and an understanding that India has a lot of low-cost science and manufacturing capacity that can be applied to this problem, and we will learn from the solutions that are developed there. But those two conditions need to be met. And let's be honest, over the last 5 to 10 years, we haven't exactly seen a lot of progress on either syndicated finance for energy in India or the kind of government efficiency that's required to close a project in 18 months instead of 7 to 9 years. And so I think there's no other market in the world that has the upside of the Indian energy sector in the short term, and we have a strong incentive, both because we care in poverty reduction and we care about our own economic future, to be an integral part of that.
Well, maybe one last question and then I'll have to wrap up.
My name is Mohan Mahal, and I'm here from California. Wonderful to hear your comments regarding the energy in India that you want to develop. In some of the projects that I'd worked, I've kind of studied everything about solar panels, and I found that the efficiency of the solar panels has become much, much better than what it used to be 4 or 5 years ago. With India being such a big market, are we looking at setting up some operations in India where we can start manufacturing those so we can fulfill the demand that it's going to have in the future? And if we are, what kind of panels, or maybe we can assist in something in determining how, we can contribute towards that kind of a venture with the United States and India. Thank you.
Well, okay. There is substantial manufacturing in India. In fact, Tata BP Solar, which was perhaps the first company to manufacture large-scale photovoltaic panels in India, was for a long time exporting the bulk of their production, as you're aware, to Germany, because the Germans were investing in a big way. And now several other units have also come up. But of course, if all these plans that we're talking about actually materialize, I would expect a substantial increase in production capacity in India. That has to happen. So I would say to investors in the US, this is a moment of opportunity. And I think if you come in over there, you would have a guaranteed market, not only at a steady level, but one that would grow very rapidly in the next few years. So that's the scenario that I would like to see.
I endorse that entirely.
Well, thank you very much. Please give a big hand to Dr. Rajiv Shah for...
Thank you, Dr. Shah. We'd like to present Dr. Shah with a token of our appreciation. So if you could stay on stage for just one more moment, please.